A Milwaukee judge accused of helping an undocumented man evade arrest has been released from federal custody after her own arrest Friday. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane has more.
The arraignment of Judge Hannah Dugan is scheduled for May 15th at the federal courthouse in Milwaukee. She'll have her opportunity at that hearing to enter a not guilty plea. Her arrest has had seismic impact politically already and is quite a statement by the Trump administration as they handle immigration cases. They allege in charging documents Judge Dugan was at court a week ago Friday, and that a defendant in her courtroom for domestic battery was being pursued that day by immigration agents, and that agents were outside the judge's courtroom. According to the charging documents, the judge called the presence of the immigration agents there for that cause absurd, and then sent the immigration agents to the chief judge's office. While they were at the chief judge's office, they allege Judge Dugan moved the defendant who was to be detained to a jury box seat and then out a jury doorway into a hallway not commonly used by the public. According to the charging documents, the agents eventually caught up with that defendant, arrested him, but now the FBI alleges Judge Dugan engaged in obstruction, a federal felony for which she now is criminally charged. Her name is on the defendant's signature line in the release conditions. Some Democrats have called this an overreach, a new front, and a threat to democracy with the Trump administration. And the Attorney General today said it is a righteous and justified arrest.
Lilia Luciano joins us now. Lilia, thanks for being here. What are both sides saying about this and what happens next?
I mean, Lizzie, I think when you look at this case, this really stresses the divide between the Trump administration and their goals of increasing the number of people to be deported and the judicial system and the judges that are basically trying to uphold the law. In this case in particular, look, it seems like this judge might have broken the law. But this kind of takes us back to all of the times that we have heard this week, for instance, of judges who are trying to block the Trump administration, for instance, from using the Alien Enemies Act. The attorney for this judge, for Judge Dugan, told the AP, we've reached out from CBS News, have not been able to communicate with her attorneys, but one of her attorneys told the AP, Judge Dugan wholeheartedly regrets and protests her arrest. It was not made in the interest of public safety, basically her arrest. But as Scott said, she is due next in court on May 15th. At that point, for an arraignment, she will be able to plead not guilty. But this is just one example of how the administration is trying to achieve those higher goals of more deportations, and judges are getting in the way. Perhaps in this way, well, she's being accused of obstructing justice. It's not going through the judicial process. It seems to have been a physical instance, but it's kind of symbolic of what's happening in so many courts across the country when it comes to these deportations.
And you actually spoke to the Trump administration's border czar, Tom Holman, before this happened. Here's part of your conversation.
I'm asking about the Venezuelans who were sent to another country, were thrown into a prison without any due process.
That's not true.
Because what you're saying is
you can't say any due process. Due process. Hundreds of hours were spent on verifying they're a member of a
yeah, but due
terrorist
process
gang.
means you can be in front of a judge and argue against the accusation that's going to land you in prison. It doesn't mean that people only investigate and declare you a criminal or a gang member.
Due process comes in many fashions.
So tell us more about his thoughts. When he's saying hundreds of hours, is he talking about each case or collectively?
That is such a good question, and we've had this conversation a couple of times. I've tried to get more details about what kind of evidence shows not only that every single Venezuelan who was deported to El Secot, this maximum security prison in El Salvador, actually has evidence of either committing crimes, which he agrees that many of them have not committed crimes, or 60 Minutes investigated and found that 75% of them have not committed crimes in the United States or elsewhere. But what he's talking about is about trusting the good men and women who have done these investigations. And I asked the border czar, Tom Holman, well, there have been Americans who have spent days in these recent weeks in detention because of mistakes that were made by those very people who are good men and women investigating, and that's why you need a due process. He says, well, that's being determined. I think this is such an important story to stay on the track of these deportations, because every day something big happens and we kind of move away. And those Venezuelans are sent by our country. And at least in one of those cases, all we've seen personally from reviewing the documents, talking to family members, not one, more than one, we've just seen these tattoos that experts have confirmed to me in different countries from Venezuela to Colombia throughout the region are not evidence of being a gang member. So we have a lot more coming up on the CBS Evening News and next week with the rest of our interview.
Before we let you go, the Trump administration announced Friday thousands of foreign student visas will be reinstated. Talk us through that change.
Well, this is something that had so many international students deeply concerned, because if you lose your visa status, then that makes you deportable. Many of these thousands of visas were challenged because of people's even small run-ins with the law. It sounds like right now the Trump administration is backtracking on that, but that doesn't mean that this is the end of this. ICE is hoping to have a new policy that would allow them to remove these visas a lot faster. And to be clear, we're talking about thousands of students, not the high-profile students who the Secretary of State directly accused of terrorist activity. These are students who, from one day to the next, suddenly were threatened to be deported if they lost their status and who were attending U.S. universities. So more to come on that.
All right, Lilia Luciano, thank you. And again, you can see more of Lilia's interview with Holman tonight on the CBS Evening News at 6:30 p.m. Eastern.